Uh-huh.
It's 6 o'clock and I have started the recording.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back. Happy New Year. We haven't seen each other since the new year. We're going to be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Walker.
I pledge
Remember-
allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
to the flag
one nation,
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and all our family members and friends. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's everybody who is not speaking, please mute yourself. I see a number of people who are not muted. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Present.
Dr. Henderson, Mr. Howard,
Present.
Mr. Levenstein,
Here.
Ms. Maida,
Here.
Ms. Mineo,
Here.
Ms. Santiago,
here,
Mr. Stridarn,
Here.
Mr. Walker.
Here.
Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby recesses into executive session for the following purpose. Matter made confidential in DFERPA, employment history of particular individuals, matters leading to the employment of particular individuals, and to obtain advice from legal counsel. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
so moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes,
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker.
Yes.
See everybody in exec.
Madam President, you're all set. The recording has been turned back on.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Welcome back and Happy New Year to those of you who are tuning in. I'm going to turn this over to our Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Padilla.
Thank you, Madam President, and Happy New Year, everyone. We hope that you are in good health and good spirits and ready to embrace what 2021 has for us. All of the opportunities that we can take advantage of to continue to move our district forward. Tonight, I have one item. It's an update for Operation Reopen, and I'm going to share my screen in 1 second. Okay, so we have a couple of very pertinent updates for the board and the community this evening. As you can see, much of what we've been involved in has been learning the COVID-19 rapid testing, trying to get information out to our community regarding vaccinations. There's an open survey out right now that we are imploring families, please, please, please take this survey. It closes Friday. And then I just want to talk a little bit about the upcoming schedule. So because we are in a yellow zone, we are required to test 20% of our scholars and the adults. And so again, that is a requirement set by the state. We're given a 2-week window in order to conduct that testing. So as I've indicated in previous weeks, the minute students come back for in-person student instruction, we have to, our 2-week window resumes, which means we have until February 1st to finish acquiring the 20%. Today, we started our in-district testing of NFA Main. We were hopeful to get NFA West and North tested today, but we were only able to do just NFA Main. All other schools will be testing tomorrow. It's an asynchronous day. And again, on the 19th, the first day students are back for in-person instruction, we will also begin testing at all of our respective schools. Just make sure, okay. So we, in the town hall, I tried to stress to families that without these consent forms, we won't be able to keep the schools open. And that's, as you can imagine, it's really important. So as long as we hit the 20% for each building, we'll be able to keep open that school. And I'm trying to be very clear so that way our families, our faculty and staff understand that it's per school. So if all schools hit their 20%, then we'll be open. Those schools will be open. If any school doesn't hit the 20%, then that school will have to close. We are going to be sending out reminders just to help families understand how important this is. We've certainly heard you loud and clear, many of you, that you want schools open so students can come back for in-person instruction. And that's exactly what we're attempting to do, but we need your help. All right, so please return the consent form so that way we can begin testing of students. We believe, at least for the adults, that we will be able to get our 20% this week, and the adults will be done. As it relates to vaccinations, so far the state has released 2 groups, 1A and 1B. We did have some of our PPS staff, nurses to be exact, they were included in the group of 1A. And we did have a few vaccinated in that round. And most recently, the group 1B was released, and we have a number of different faculty and staff that either have already received the vaccination or are scheduled to receive it. Let me just go back to this for 1 second, just to note probably the obvious, and that is there's not enough vaccines for everyone. The governor has been clear about that. So what we're attempting to do, as soon as we get information for registration, we're going to push it out to our faculty and staff so that way they can register and get the vaccines, those who wish to get it. So as soon as we get more information, we'll continue to put it out there so our faculty and staff have it. So as it relates to the parent survey, again, I want to stress that it's open. We need families to tell us if they want their children to come in or if they want them to stay home. The survey will close on Friday, this Friday at 4 o'clock. And then we have to quickly analyze that information and get it over to our principals so that way they can make the necessary adjustments, as well as food service, as well as transportation. What we did here for you is just quickly show you what the current model and the results of the survey was. So 53% of our families right now are currently 100% remote. As of today, we have over 1,000 responses. So this is incomplete, but it is trending in the direction we believe ultimately the data will tell us, and that is more families and more students want in-person instruction. So as of today, Tuesday, with over 1,000 responses, right now it's trending in the opposite direction, where more families want in-person instruction versus hybrid. Let's see if that holds true on Friday. The other clarification I would quickly give is that if a family doesn't respond to the survey, their child will stay in the current model they're in. All right, so families, if you wish to change, you got to let us know on the survey. If we don't hear from you, your child will stay in his or her current model. So we treated the first half of the year and decisions that we've made in relation to our families. Again, these decisions were for the entire first semester. So if a family chose remote, they were remote for the entire semester. Now we're going to go by quarters. So for the upcoming quarter, third quarter, again, we're going to give families an option. However, I have to stress, if your child is failing, they should come in person. And you will be receiving calls from either your child's teacher, child's guidance counselor, your child's administrator, stressing the importance of coming in for in-person instruction. Again, this is for children who are struggling, children who don't like the hybrid or the remote model and are doing well, but still want to come in. We encourage that. And then for the fourth quarter, although no decisions have been made just yet, we are strongly considering having everyone return to a in-person hybrid structure. Again, that decision will be made, much later from now, but that is a consideration that we are contemplating at this point. All right, so first quarter, when children return on the 19th, that is still the first semester. And so they are going to stay in their current model. And that is through the end of the month. And then starting February 1st, the third quarter will start with all of the correlating changes to students either being remote or in person. Okay, this is certainly an image you guys are familiar with because we share it every time at the end of the presentation, because we need to stress that everyone needs to do their part. They need to protect themselves. They need to protect those around them. So one way to do that is to mask up. Another way to do that is to watch your distance. And the third way is to wash your hands. So the 3 W's of prevention is what we will continue to help our community with. Madam President, that concludes tonight's update.
Thank you. I see one hand already. Mr. Stridiron?
Thank you, Madam President. So I see that the fourth quarter is when you're contemplating with the 100% students. When does that begin, the fourth quarter? And how much in advance would the board need, would the public need, would the transportation companies need to prepare for something like that?
Yeah, right now we would probably make an announcement regarding fourth quarter midway through the third quarter. So that would be several weeks in advance. And right now we've been at a minimum giving families a week, a heads up for at least a week. Other times we've done that much further in advance.
Mr. Levinstein?
Thank you. So I just have a question on the parent survey response. So 10% is not a lot. And the fact that if they're in one and they don't return that they want to change, they're going to stay in that group. And I understand that. But one thing that's a little concern of mine is we've had grades that haven't been in yet, correct?
Correct.
8th, 11th, and 12th. So now those kids have been remote, not by choice at this point. That was, we didn't call them in. So I would hope that there would be a little bit extra effort reached out to those families? Because they automatically are going to be 100% remote if there's no discussion in the family or with the parents. 10% response for that may not be as good as others.
Yeah, fair enough. And, I think that where it's trending just falls in line with what, the emails, the phone calls, and the amount of times families have told us, or asked, when are schools going to be open again? Children need to be back in, et cetera, et cetera. So, but I appreciate your point. Mr. Bear obviously is here, so we will both communicate with the high school faculty and with the middle schools to make sure that 8th graders, 11th graders, and 12th graders, those families understand the consequence of not completing the survey.
Thank you.
Dr. Henderson?
Thank you, Madam President. Dr. Padilla, I just had a quick question regarding how the students are chosen for the random testing. I don't know if you could just elaborate on that every week.
Yeah. I should have mentioned this. Thank you. So right now it's those who volunteer. So for our adults and for our children, we've encouraged, volunteers to come forward. If we get the 20%, then we're fine. If we get over 20%, then we are going to randomize the students who get tested.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure we try to get as broad of sample size as possible, just because I really think that could affect the data. I wouldn't want you to have, a high percentage of kids who maybe just have a single parent household background versus, a child who might come from a household where there's 8, 9, 10 other family members there, and that could really affect, how that data turns out for that week. So just a consideration.
Yeah, thank you.
Mrs. Burton?
Hi, thank you. So in response, Dr. Padilla, you said in terms of failing students, and you used the word stressing, you would, stress to parents the importance of them, potentially coming back to school. So I'm a little concerned about that. Why would we leave that for parents and students to make those decisions? I'm, particularly if it's students that didn't fare well last year and they're struggling again this year. Now we're moving into third quarter. They struggled first quarter, second quarter. Why are we giving them the choice? And can we potentially mandate that?
Yeah, so I completely understand your struggle. We have the same struggle because in the end, we want our children to do well. And the way I kind of look at this is that if we have a semester's worth of information that tells us you're not doing well, something has to change. I mean, we don't want to see a ton of retention as a result of everything. So I think where we're at, and this is why we're going to treat this on a quarterly basis at this point, is because we're going to continue to monitor. We're going to be rolling out additional supports that we want children to take advantage of. And again, for those individuals who are really struggling, this is all coupled with the fact that, there are families that don't feel comfortable with their children in person. And so I have to acknowledge and respect that, while at the same time try to figure out with our team, what supports can we provide additionally to what their teachers are doing to get them on track so they don't fail. Now, we've asked our principals to make sure those students who are failing, they get a phone call, and those families are encouraged to allow their children to come in. And so we're gonna monitor and see how that goes. If we see, by the 5-week progress report period, there's been, a shift, then at that point, we'll continue to move forward in our current structure. But it might result in children having to come in mid-quarter because they're still failing. And then fourth quarter, and this is why we're strongly considering the fourth quarter children coming in, all children coming in for in person. That has a lot of layers, and so one of them quickly is we don't know what the model in September is going to look like. So every child, in my opinion, should have at least this year an attempt at in-person hybrid, just in case we go to that model in September. Again, I heard a lot of crazy things today that because of the vaccine not being rolled out fast enough that we're going to be dealing with this through the summer, potentially, who knows? But if that's the case, will we be ready to open up schools in September in a 100% in-person model like we've always done? And I don't know, all we can do is prepare for it. But nevertheless, I think it would be important for students to have some kind of in-person hybrid experience. And so that's why we're going to consider that for the fourth quarter, not the third.
Dr. Henderson, Mrs. Burton, can you lower your hands, please? Mr. Howard?
Thank you, Madam President. I would like for the superintendent to elaborate a little bit more on the 20% threshold and understanding that the demographics of our district and understanding that certain populations are being advised not to take the vaccine on the first iteration, and the impact of that advice going to those certain populations, how that is going to impact those numbers. Can you speak to that a little bit?
So I can't really speak to the vaccinations because that is everyone's personal choice. And just like getting tested is your personal choice. The difference between the vaccination and testing in this case is that we're under clear guidelines in a yellow zone to hit 20%. Now, we're hoping we get more than 20%. And then this goes back to Dr. Henderson's question. At that point, who will we test once we hit the threshold? But if in a school of 1,000 students, that means 200 of them would have to be willing to test. And in that case, it's a consent from the family to allow them to be tested. We've also indicated to families that for any parent or guardian who wishes to be present while their child is testing, that we would allow that to happen. Again, we want our schools to be open. We want to be able to allow people to come in person. And if that means allowing parents to be present while it's happening, then that's exactly what we'll do. But that's how we're looking at it, Mr. Howard. A school of 1,000, we need 200 children in that school in order to keep it open.
Thank you.
And that's over the course of 2 weeks. We have to hit that 20%.
Dr. Badia, I have two comments. One, I think 1,000 responses to the survey is not enough to make generalizations out of. I really think we need to do a better job in getting parents involved in responding to the survey in order to make some clear decisions on whether it's more or less that want a hybrid or a virtual session that they're going to have. Second, I watched Laura Garcia and do the blurring of the background, and I also watched our Mrs. Keach is her name, do the blurring of the backgrounds for people who would like to have their backgrounds blurred or their picture changed behind their face like Mr. Howard has today. It was wonderful. I mean, this is something that was really good that went out on YouTube. Laura's thing in Spanish was unbelievable. It was really quite good. And so was the other one, helping parents to understand that maybe they're not comfortable having people enter their homes and come into their homes and see what's in their background. So I thought that was a really wonderful thing. So thank you for that. That was really, really very good. And I want to thank those two staff members for their work. So thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Monell, we have heard from students themselves that they're embarrassed, they don't feel comfortable. And despite the teacher's efforts to tell them to put their camera on, which they're supposed to do, there's these social aspects that children have to deal with. And, I'm hoping for any student who's listening, any parent who's listening, those videos are available. So that way you can also know how to blur a background when you're on a Google Meet or a Zoom call. this is here to stay. It's not just for the pandemic. We're going to be doing hybrid sessions and virtual sessions probably here on out, even when we're past the pandemic, just because it's the way of the future. So thank you for that.
Board members, are there any other questions or comments?
Yes, Madam President,
Go ahead, Mr. Howard.
I purposely gave that virtual background based on your email to Dr. Padilla the other day. So I wanted our kids to know that, we're there to help them and to aid them and to really be there for them and try to get as much participation as possible. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Howard.
Yeah, please keep sharing your ideas. So as you see things and hear things that we can make adjustments to help our faculty and staff and students, by all means, let us know so we can do our part. So if there are no other questions, Madam President, that concludes my items for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Padilla. We're going to move on to our public comment on agenda items. Mr. McCoy?
There was no public comment on agenda or agenda items, Madam President.
Thank you. We're going to move on to board committees. We're going to go to our Curriculum and Instruction Committee. Mrs. Maida.
Thank you, Madam President. We had several updates on curriculum at our last meeting. One that was very good and interesting was the Early Learning Winter Academy. And we continued that discussion. They had quite a few participants, and we had a discussion about doing it more frequently during other vacations and during the summer. So that was a very uplifting discussion. Also, the committee for report card is working diligently to continue that and have that done in a timely fashion. And we had two wonderful, Mr. Romano had a presentation about science and all the exciting things that they're doing virtually. And of course, we had a language acquisition discussion too with Mrs. Beato. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Maida. We're going to move on to the Exceptional Learners Committee. Mrs. Burton.
Thank you, Madam President. Exceptional learners, we met on January 6th. And we reiterated right from the beginning that in response to Dr. Padilla's reorganization, that student support services and all of those tentacles up under student support services is now included with exceptional learners. And Mrs. Maneo was very eloquent in saying that the reason why we're keeping the name exceptional learners is because all of our scholars are special and exceptional learners. And so the breadth of what is happening is that we have special ed, and then we have all of student support services under one umbrella, which Dr. Roman oversees. And so we started with that brief overview. And then Michael Regan, he gave us an update, an SEL update screener, in which a survey was administered. It was based on Likert scale 1 through 5. And he gave us some really great charts in terms of the outcome of those surveys. What we do have recognized is that social emotional learning is it's much larger than maybe some of us know about. I'm familiar with it, but we're not sure if everyone. So we have asked that Dr. Roman give the board an update in terms of actually what is social emotional learning and what are those areas that encompass social emotional learning and how the district is approaching social emotional learning. The data was really interesting. We had good questions around the data and the response to the data. Then the third item was an update on the My Brother's Keepers 3-day Winter Institute. And it included guest speakers, a pre and post survey. There were some really great highlights in which there was an art theme, past, present, and future. Yeah, I mean, there was an expectation that it would be about, more kids than actually attended, which is okay. And that was in response to limited teachers' response. But there ended up being about 13 kids that participated, which was really, really good. And they were given packets, and it seemed like it was a really great opportunity for the winter section. And that was it. It was a very good meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Burton. We're going to move on to Audit and Finance Committee. Mrs. Santiago.
Madam President, I'm going to ask Mr. Levenstein to provide an update since he ran the meeting today, if that's okay with you. Thank you.
That's fine. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. So we met at 5 p.m. today. We discussed the Audit and Finance Committee discussed the monthly bills and reports, the monthly claims auditor report. We also had a discussion on the corrective action plan that the district is submitting to the state and follow up to this plan. We discussed 2 items regarding property taxes and a revised contract with the Heartland Payment Systems, which revolves around the AP exam fee collections. So most of these items are on today's finance agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levenstein and Mrs. Santiago. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Secondary, Mr. Bayer.
Thank you, Madam President. Curriculum Secondary has 1 item for your consideration, 5.1, the resolution to authorize an agreement with Middletown Park Rehabilitation Health in Fishkill.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So move.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker. Mr. Walker, you gotta unmute. You're on mute, Mr. Walker.
Yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Burton.
Yes.
Thank you. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Bayer. We're going to move on to the Assistant Superintendent for Student Support Services, Dr. Roman.
Thank you, Madam President. For under Student Support Services, we have item 6.1, recommendations from CPSE Committee for your consideration.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson.
Yes.
Madam President, I have 1 item that I would like to respectfully request to add to the agenda.
Mr. McCoy, can you read that, please?
Yes, ma'am. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby authorizes Dr. Pedro Roman, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, to schedule, conduct, and participate in resolution sessions held in accordance with regulations of the Commissioner at 8 NYCRR 200.5. And be it further resolved that the following such resolution sessions, the Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services shall promptly provide members of the board with pertinent written information regarding any settlement agreements reached to enable the board to consider the terms of such settlements and offer the board the opportunity to exercise its authority to void such settlement agreements within 3 business days.
I'd like to entertain a motion to add this to the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on adding? Roll call to add.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard.
Yes.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein.
Yes.
And in case you're wondering, it looks like my son Andrew wants to give me a kiss.
That
Yes.
concludes my items, Madam President.
That's
Thank-
important.
Thank you, Dr. Roman.
I-
Yes, that is.
I second that.
We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Dr. Spindler.
Thank you, Madam President. The Division of Finance presents to you items 7.1 through 7.5 as a consent agenda.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call on these items.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes?
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida.
Yes.
That concludes my items for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Spindler. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.13 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo. You're on mute, Ms. Mineo.
Oh, sorry, yes. And
Thank
I understand we have our new library director on the line. If she's a telephone number that's there, if everybody sees that. Congratulations. Dr. Padilla, would you like to say a word?
Yeah, just we're very excited to transition, and we again wish Mr. Thomas a lot of just restful time in his retirement. And we're excited for the future development of the library and being able to take it forward with the new leadership. So congratulations.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. We're going to move on to the clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have the approval of the minutes from the December 15th board meeting.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Stridiron,
Yes.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes.
Mr. Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago.
Yes.
That concludes my items, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy. We have no public comments on non-agenda items, so I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Ms. Burton,
Yes.
Dr. Henderson,
Yes.
Mr. Howard,
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Levinstein,
Yes.
Ms. Maida,
Yes.
Ms. Mineo,
Yes.
Ms. Santiago,
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.
Thank
Good
you.
night.